Chapter 17. Meet the Switch Hitters. The Littles moved twice. First, from the Deerhurst dollhouse to a large mansion in the city. Then after that oversized expense wore off our psyche, Kay insisted our next move be to a much smaller place within the city of Wilmington. We got a Father, Son, Holy Ghost house on the only brick street in Wilmington. It was for sale. It was downtown in the city, just like the good old days back in Mount Airy. And we could remain in our good old parish that we already lived in, which was like Holy Cross up in Philly, with a good old pastor who knows how to run things the right way. I was very easily sold. Kay is half Sicilian. She always liked being called that better than being called Italian, especially since the Godfather craze began. I enjoyed needling Kay about being Sicilian. A Sicilian and Irish heritage for my kids? What a combo, just like the movie. As babies, all three had fair skin, deep blue eyes, blonde hair. Actually, Pat's was platinum. The storyline from me to them was always the same. Irish genes beat the hell out of Italian genes any day of the week. You're Irish. This point was stated very clearly at any dinner table or any other time a kid asked who they were in regard to their personal heritage. Kay always answered this patiently by rolling her greenish-brown Sicilian, Prussian, Indian, English eyes, shaking her head sideways. Your great-great-grandmother was Cherokee. Pat loved being Cherokee. He thought he was an American Indian. Inner city neighborhoods were yuppies. Young, urban, professional, upwardly mobile college graduates employed by big companies. Our neighborhood that we moved into in the city was called Cool Springs. It was a transient inner city neighborhood, a mixed neighborhood, as what they call them today. I delighted in saying our yuppie dog, whose name was Molly McGuire, a Great Pyrenees, had to learn Spanish before I could take it for a walk. Pat called Molly a Great Pair of Knees. We lived across from Cool Springs Reservoir, which is maybe a half a block of water. And it was a delight. With me explaining to any friend why we moved, we decided to be near the water so we can watch the boats go out in the mornings. Winking. Down deep, though, it was true. I was lonesome for Mount Airy. When we lived in the dollhouse, I pestered and insisted we move to a city parish like Holy Cross with a pastor who ran things the right way so the kids could be brought up the right way. We did. Monsignor Paul J. Taggart became my ideal pastor. He was my father figure. Eventually the mansion was just too big for us, so as proper yuppies, we downsized, but we always stayed with Monsignor's parish. December 1979, Thomas L. Little became known as Thomas L. Little, Esquire. Wow, that decade went quick. After fun politics of the 60s, the 70s were totally awful. And I mean awful. I quit politics. I was way over my head financially. Things were falling apart everywhere. I enrolled in law school after I got out of the legislature. My family was apparently content, so I was content. By the 80s, I was admitted to the bar and became a proud custodian of a solo law practice on Lawyers Row. Way back in 1972, I quit politics, the Republican Party, and the state legislature. I went to school 4 nights a week and all day Saturday for 4 years, while I tried valiantly to save our national retirement plan from being taken over by the corrupt and corrupted by brokers, bankers, and insurance agents. I had the idea, but they had the money. As I said, the 70s was awful. I was really drinking heavy and hiding it very well. I was turning into my own father right in front of my very own eyes. Down deep, I knew for certain I was in trouble. I was a true lush. I passed the bar the second time around and became known as an up-and-coming hotshot union and criminal defense attorney, a well-known labor lawyer representing all the tough guys in Delaware. The first client I represented after passing the bar was the Teamsters Union and the Teamsters boss, known as Big Frank Sheeran. Then after that, I was hired to represent the public employees, and then the bus drivers, and then until I represented a whole lot of unions in the state of Delaware. And I single-handedly helped organize the DuPont Company Employees International at the Edgemoor plant. All the while, I was a practicing drunk. Don't ever try to convince me alcoholics are not clever or smart. I knew I was heading downhill fast, but I was terrific at covering my downhill tracks. Delaware is known as the corporate state, not the union state. So it's not a very big surprise that I was practicing law by representing the underdog. Actually, it all got started while I was in the legislature and I didn't even know it. No one in the parking lot gang ever wanted to serve on the labor committee. We, the winners of the speaker's race, gave all the losers every committee chairmanship or assignment that they wanted, and there were no takers for labor. So I volunteered. I told the labor leaders that I would vote out I would vote out any bill that they could get assigned to my committee, and I kept my word. When I began law school, they trusted me and hired me as a labor representative part-time. I was hired by the Teamsters a week after I was sworn in before the bar. There had been a secretive meeting at Cuz's, a well-known mob hangout in South Philly. Big Frank, the Teamster boss, later, by admission in a book, a capo for the Bufalino regime, said at the meeting, "There ain't no fucking lawyers in Delaware with any fucking balls." A law school friend of mine who was at the meeting said, "How about Tommy Little?" He said, "He's a fucking politician. He's not a fucking lawyer." And my friend said, "I got some good news for you. Tommy passed the bar last week." The very next day, I got a call to meet Big Frank at the Teamsters headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware, and I was hired. It was now the 80s, and on paper, I looked great. However, many personal and political issues changed dramatically since the good old political gold rush days of the early 70s, and a lot of drinks surged under that bridge. Many political dramas closed. I had switched sides and everything. I wanted to make the point that I was out of politics and I would never run again, so I registered Democrat in secret. Details are not important. It's best explained as follows. 3 strikes and you're out. Strike 1, conflict of interest. At the end of my first legislative term, a huff and puff article appeared in the downstate newspaper, the Delaware State News, which was trying desperately to compete for commercial acceptance in an attempt to promote their first Sunday edition in Upper Delaware, known as Newcastle County, where I lived. A man-made canal completely separates upstate and downstate Delaware in language, culture, and politics. We were divided on everything on both sides of the canal. Upstate was covered for decades by the News Journal Company with a regular Sunday edition. That was the main competition. One Sunday, a pain-in-the-ass neighbor banged on my door, waving a downstate newspaper in front of my face. And guess who was on the front page? Headline, Representative Little in Conflict. Under it, a picture of Representative Thomas L. Little, Republican Deerhurst, standing on legislative floor, hands folded in front, head bowed in thought. The neighbor yelled, "Hell, Tommy, it looks awful. It looks like you're taking a leak on the House floor." It was 3 pages, glittering with generalities front and back, about my clever and intricate corporate scam, building a conspiratorial network of brokerage houses, banks, and insurance companies throughout the entire country, destined to control billions and billions in personal savings. It claimed that I alone was about to rip off the entire American empire, Asia, and most of Western Europe. It claimed it was all put together and manipulated by little old me. Every one of the first 3 pages, advertising brilliant national retirement plan, was now literally available to all American citizens. I boldly asserted, and the reporter boldly rephrased, every working American can now put their entire income away tax-free so long as it lands in one of Little's companies or flows through Little's enormous financial scams as it makes its rounds. The accusations were entirely true. I was chairman of the board of directors of First National Retirement Systems Incorporated. In the news version, I looked like Attila the Hun, Howard Hughes, Machiavelli, King Kong, and other political and financial rape artists throughout history. I was the chairman. I had creatively organized the national financial community to operate as vendors in the National Retirement Plan, solely to get around an obscure special interest tax loophole, which I explained before. As chairman, I testified at congressional hearings, state legislative hearings, state treasurers' conferences, anywhere, anytime, any way, promoting the National Retirement Plan. It is simply a working class perk, an individually managed retirement account for every single American, all for the price of $1 per month. The plan was offered to all taxpayers, was an ability to save tax-free for retirement. Why? Well, teachers had tax-sheltered annuities, and big-time corporate executives had deferred compensation, so why not? What's good for one is good for all, grudgingly admitted the IRS, and the savings could go into just about any legal investment. The state of Delaware adopted this deferred compensation plan for all of the public employees. Russ Peterson, the governor, and the entire legislature unanimously approved it. I testified in all 4 caucuses, Democrats and Republicans. Everyone knew I was the leader of the company, and everyone thought it was a really great idea, until the shit hit the fan that Sunday in the state news. I'll continue with strike 2 at the next reading. The next reading is called A Change-Up. The story actually killed us. After months of negative stories, investigation, hearings, and whatnot, I was declared innocent by a unanimous vote in the House, but nobody ever read a drop of it in the News Journal.